Hey everyone, Jake here for American Trucks, and in this video we're taking a look at the Bilstein 0 to 2 inch B8 6112 front suspension leveling kit fitting 2015 to 2020 four-wheel drive F-150s excluding the Raptor. And if you want the ultimate leveling kit for your F-150, look no further than this B8 6112 setup from Bilstein. Combining some of their best damping technology and hefty shocks with the ability to adjust your truck's front ride height, these are some of the coolest pieces out there on the market. Now, a lot of leveling kits just get you additional height, which is all well and good, but this one is different. And coming from suspension experts Bilstein, it's to be expected. This setup includes new springs, new shocks, new bump stops, and the ability to adjust your truck's front ride height via these snap rings and these adjustable spring perches. So let's just dive into that while we're already on the topic. So in order to adjust the ride height of your truck's front end, you're going to use these snap rings right here. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different levels that you can go from. Anything from stock height up to a 2-inch lift. So if you leave it in the bottom rung like you see it here, this is going to be your stock height. Just slide that guy right on and your spring is going to sit right on top of that. Now if you want to adjust it up and get all the level you can, you can put this snap ring right up here in the top rung. And of course that means you can also use one of the other slots in between to get this dialed in just how you like it. It's pretty cool stuff. Now, adjusting that height once you have these installed is going to require you to take them out and disassemble the units with the snap rings, put them in a new place. But having the ability to adjust this to your taste at all puts them far ahead of a lot of other fixed leveling kits. Now, with these in their highest setting, you can also fit some larger wheels and tires. Anything up to a 33-inch tire should fit without any rubbing issues. Anything larger than that would require a bigger lift or leveling kit, but 33s are going to fit without an issue. Now keep in mind too that if you are running these on a lower setting, you're going to need to adjust your tire size down accordingly. So if you've got some big, beefy, aggressive 33s on there, running this in the stock position is probably not going to work out for you. But there is more than height to talk about here. Bilstein are the experts in damping, and I have run some of their shocks on several of my own vehicles, and every time I've been really happy with the results. Now the B8s are some of their best, and they combine great damping out on the road with consistent fade-free performance out on the trail. Now these are a really hefty monotube design, and they are specifically tuned for each vehicle application, so they're going to suit the needs of the F-150 about as perfectly as you can get. Now inside of here, what you can't see, of course, they feature some pretty cool stuff too, including what they call digressive valving technology. So that's going to be in the valves inside here, and it allows the shocks to instantly react to impacts and varying road surfaces. Now inside there are self-adjusting deflective disc valves and allows for that variability in rebound, compression, and travel. And that just is going to add up to more control out on the street or trail for you. And despite these being non-adjustable monotube shocks without remote reservoirs, the damping here is excellent, and you can definitely feel the difference in body control versus stock. Part of it is just plain how big these are. These are really big old shocks, so they're going to have a lot of damping power, so if you're working them hard, your truck's going to be able to keep up. But they're not going to ruin the ride quality by any means. In fact, it stays pretty similar to stock. It is going to be a bit more firm, but again, that's going to add up to more control for you. And it really is a shock that doesn't compromise in any way. Now, of course, we have to talk about the springs here because this kit comes with front springs to match. Now, these are beefed up versus your stock springs, so they're going to match the characteristics of those shocks perfectly. And if any of you have ever had the misfortune of driving on cut springs, bad springs, or a bad coilover before, you're going to know exactly what I'm on about. Just like the shocks, these are specifically designed for each different vehicle application, and it's nice to see them included here because they're going to pair so well with these dampers, so you get a really nice, controlled, comfortable ride on the street or out on the trail. Like we talked about a few moments ago, these shock bodies are huge. They're 60 millimeters in diameter, and the shock body itself is zinc plated for durability and good looks. Inside again are those 60 millimeter digressive pistons we were talking about, along with chromed and hardened piston rods up here. The springs are cold wound and they're powder coated for enhanced durability. And they sit on billet anodized spring perches as well. And you also get new OEM bushings at the bottom mounting points, new bump stops, and all the new hardware that you need for the bottom mounting points as well. So it gives you pretty much everything you need short of top hats. Now you can utilize your factory ones, or you can get new ones. Now, if you're going through all this trouble, I would just put new top hats on it as well, but I'm not the one who's in charge of your budgeting, so you do what you gotta do. Now, Bilstein also backs their stuff up with a lifetime warranty against defects, and I can tell you from experience, they're very good about honoring that warranty. Just make sure you have your receipt. Pricing comes in at about $875 for this kit, and while that is expensive for a leveling kit, this is not just your ordinary leveling kit. It is positioned as a premium option, and thus you're going to pay a premium to get it. But again, Bilstein's products are always a standout in the category, and with all the damping technology and the springs and all the stuff that you get in this kit, if you've got the room and the budget, this is definitely worth picking up. Now, we do also carry the matching set of B8 6112 rear shocks, so if you want a fully matched set front and rear, which I would recommend, take a look at those on our site as well. Installation is going to get a 3 out of 3, and you can expect the job to take you about 4 hours to complete. Now, you will need a spring compressor for this job no matter how you decide to tackle it. Whether you reuse your factory top hats or you buy new ones, you're still going to need that compressor in order to get these on and get everything bolted up properly. So it is a bit of an involved process, just be aware going in. With that though, let's head out to the shop and we'll walk you through it.
The tools you'll need for this project are an impact gun, a 1/4 inch and 3/8 drive ratchet, an 8, a 10, a 13, an 18, and a 21 millimeter socket, a caliper hanging tool, a 15 and an 18 millimeter wrench, a pair of flat nose needle nose pliers, adjustable pliers, a hammer, a pry bar, and a vacuum pump. You'll also need to source a spring compressor. Hi everyone, today we're installing a front leveling kit on our F-150, so let's get started with the uninstall. First thing we're going to do on our uninstall is remove these 2 brackets here that hold our brake line and our ABS line to the steering knuckle and disconnect them from the bracket for the control arm up here to get them out of the way to relieve some of the tension when we remove the steering knuckle from the upper control arm. So we're going to use an 8 millimeter and a 10 millimeter socket to remove these 2 brackets here, and then a trim removal tool to pop out these plastic push pins here that hold the brakes up there. So we use our 8 millimeter to disconnect the bracket from the ABS line. And then we'll use our 10 millimeter socket to disconnect our brake hose from the steering knuckle. Now we'll use our trim removal tool to remove these plastic push clips here, and then one at the top. Next thing we're going to do is remove our brake caliper and our rotor to get those out of the way and remove some of the weight from the steering knuckle. So we're going to use our 21 millimeter socket on the back of the steering knuckle here to remove our brake caliper. Now we can lift our caliper away from the rotor and then pull our rotor straight out. Now you want to hang up your rotor on some sort of a hanging device to keep the stress off of your brake hose. And now we'll just go ahead and pull our rotor off. Now we're going to go ahead and disconnect our tie rod end from our steering knuckle using our 21 millimeter socket. Now with our nut removed, you can go ahead and tap the bottom of this tie rod shaft to tap it up and dislodge it from the steering knuckle. Now we're going to go ahead and disconnect our sway bar end link right here from the sway bar so that we can go ahead and lower our lower control arm when we remove our strut. So we're going to use an 18 millimeter wrench to remove that nut. Now there are 2 vacuum lines connected together right here behind the steering knuckle itself. What we're going to do is just going to pull those off. Next thing we're going to do is remove this dust cap and the 13 millimeter nut that holds the axle into the steering knuckle. But before you remove that nut, what you want to do is put a vacuum pump on the larger of the two ports that we just disconnected the vacuum lines for, because that will prevent some damage to the actuator that's inside the steering knuckle. So let's go ahead and get this dust cap removed and get our vacuum pump installed. Now you can use a pair of adjustable pliers or a small flathead screwdriver to get in here and pull that dust cap off. Now we're going to go ahead and hook up our vacuum pump, like I said, to the larger of the two ports back here. And you want to use your vacuum pump and pull it up to about 24 or 25 inches of vacuum. Then we'll go ahead and remove our nut. So using our 13mm socket, we'll go ahead and dislodge this nut. Now we can go ahead and disconnect our steering knuckle from our upper control arm using our 18mm wrench. Now we're not going to take the nut off yet because, as you can tell, we haven't separated the ball joint shaft from the steering knuckle. So to do that, we're going to use our hammer, and we're just going to smack the top of the steering knuckle here to dislodge that ball joint shaft. Now with it loose, we can go ahead and remove our nut. And go ahead and separate our ball joint from our steering knuckle and lay that off to the side. Now we're going to remove our two lower strut mount bolts here and here using our 19mm wrench and a 19mm socket. Now we can remove the three nuts from the top of our strut using our 15mm wrench, and we can pull our strut out. And now you can repeat that whole process for the other side. Now before we can actually install our new strut, there's a couple of things that we need to take care of first. One, we need to transfer over the top hat of the old strut to the new strut. So to do that, we're going to need a spring compressor so that we can compress the spring and remove the top hat safely. Now also, normally on a OEM style strut, you're going to have a dust cap in here that goes from the top down inside the coil spring here. Now obviously we do not have a dust cap on ours because we've already done this before and it's already been removed. But in order for you to remove it, what's going to happen is you're going to have a series of these little holes in the top of the top hat here. And it's going to have some plastic injection pieces from the dust cap in there. So what you do is use a punch and a hammer and just tap those out, and then you can remove the dust cap after you get the top off. The other thing we need to do is move this clip here on the body of the new strut from the lowest position that comes from the manufacturer to the highest position. Now, because this is a 0 to 2 inch leveling kit, we're going to make it set up for the 2 inch. To do that, you can either use a small flathead screwdriver to kind of pry this up and gently move it up, or in our case, we're going to use a pair of flat nose needle nose pliers, spread it apart, and then we'll gently move it up to the highest position. Now make sure that it's completely seated in the new groove. Then we can put on our spring seat. And you want to make sure when you put your spring seat on that the flat of the spring seat is actually facing towards the top of the strut. Now let's go ahead and get this new stuff installed. All right, now we've got our original strut set up in our spring compressor. We've got our spring semi-compressed, enough to be able to loosen up the nut on the top and go ahead and release the strut so that we can get this top out of it. So now we're going to use an 18mm socket and an 8mm socket and remove this top nut here so that we can go ahead and remove the strut assembly from the spring and the top hat, and then we'll transfer the top hat to our new strut. Now we pull our strut out from the bottom, remove our top hat and the isolator, and now we can decompress this spring and put our new one in here. All right, now here's our top hat without the whole strut being assembled, and you can see these little holes all around the edge here. This is where you're going to take your punch and your hammer and tap out the plastic fittings that are inside of there to drop out the dust cap. Once you've got the dust cap removed, then we can go ahead and assemble this on our new spring and our new strut and get this installed in the car. All right, now we're going to go ahead and install our isolator for our top cap on top of our spring. And you also want to make sure that the flat edge of the spring is on the bottom. So there's a little stop in the isolator here. So we'll put that on the edge of our spring, then go ahead and set our top hat on top. Now we go ahead and put our strut up in there and get it tightened down. All right, now you also want to make sure that you put your bump stop on in this orientation on the strut with the wider end towards the top and right at the edge of the shoulder here. So now we'll go ahead, insert that up into the top hat, and using the supplied nut, we'll go ahead and put that on. And the other thing to note is to make sure that your strut studs and your lower mounting studs are in the proper alignment like they were on the OEM version. All right, now we'll use our 19mm socket and our 8mm socket to go ahead and tighten this down. And now you can repeat that whole process for the other strut. All right, now that we've got our strut assembled, we can go ahead and put it back in the truck. So we'll start at the top. Loosely attach the original nuts. And now we can go ahead and install the lower strut mount. All right, now we can go ahead and install our lower strut mount using the supplied bolts and nuts. So we'll just kind of get those out of the way a little bit. Now, if you're on a lift like ours is, you can use a pry bar to help lift up the lower control arm. If you're on a set of jack stands, you can use a floor jack to lift that up into position. Cut. So now we can go ahead, we've got our bolts in place. Go ahead and attach our nuts. Now we can go ahead and tighten down our lower strut mount bolts using our 18mm socket and our 18mm wrench. Cut. Now we go ahead and tighten down the top 3 strut mount bolts using our 15mm wrench. Now we can go ahead and attach our steering knuckle back to our upper control arm, making sure, of course, that we've got 24 inches of vacuum applied to our actuator, so we can slide that back inside. Now you may need to use a pry bar to help lower this down into place. Reattach the original nut. Now we'll tighten our nut down with our 18mm wrench. Now we'll reinstall our tie rod in and secure it with the original nut. And we'll tighten it down with our 21mm socket. Reinstall our axle retaining nut and tighten it down with our 13mm socket. Now install our dust cap. Now we've already removed our vacuum pump, so now we can go ahead and reinstall our brake rotor. And I like to just loosely install one of the lug nuts just to hold it in place while we install the caliper. Now we can reinstall our caliper with our pads and secure it using the original hardware. And we'll tighten them down with our 21mm socket. Now we'll reattach our sway bar end link. And tighten it down with our 18mm wrench. Now we go ahead and reattach our brake hose bracket and our ABS bracket using the original hardware. And we'll tighten them down using our 10mm and our 8mm socket. Reattach our ABS line to the brake line. Plug in our plastic clips at the top. And now you can repeat that whole process for the other side. Once you get everything put back together, make sure you torque everything down to manufacturer recommended specifications. And always, anytime you're doing some kind of suspension work, make sure you take it in and get an alignment done. And that wraps up our review and install of the Bilstein 0 to 2 inch B8 6112 front suspension leveling kit for your 15 to 20 four-wheel drive F-150, excluding Raptor. Thanks for watching, and remember, for all things F-150, keep it right here at AmericanTrucks.com.